Yesterday, the concentration of carbon dioxide gas in the atmosphere of Earth reached 400 parts per million. When I was a young boy in school, the atmosphere of the planet contained around 270 parts per million. So within the short time of a few decades, the content, the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has increased by about 130 parts per million. That is a fairly fast rate of accumulation. This increase in the amount of carbon dioxide in Earth's atmosphere is going to have consequences. And at the moment of those consequences, we see global warming as being the most significant and the one most likely to bring about changes that are going to affect the way we live and which are going to have a significant impact on the future of the human species and of life as we know it on Earth today. We are told that this increase in the level of carbon dioxide in Earth's atmosphere is due to the activities of the human species over the last few centuries. What is implied is that the human species has intentionally, knowingly caused this situation, which is likely to have serious consequences for its future. However, we have to take into account the fact that radical changes in the composition of Earth's atmosphere have occurred before. Perhaps the most radical of these changes in the past occurred about 2.4 billion years ago, at a time when most life on Earth was of a type that could not survive in the presence of oxygen. Now, about 2.4 billion years ago, certain organisms emerged on the planet that began to release oxygen as part of their metabolic processes. And these organisms that released oxygen began to increase. And they increased to a point where the oxygen that they released into the atmosphere caused all other organisms to which oxygen was toxic to go extinct. Now, the point that I wish to make is that we have no evidence to show that these organisms which released this oxygen into the atmosphere and brought about this fundamental change that caused the extinction of nearly all other organisms that were alive at that time, did this in an intentional and knowing way. What I am saying is that we do not know whether these organisms had any choice in this matter, or whether it was just the outcome of evolutionary processes. When we look at things from that point of view, then we must understand that it is quite possible that the human species had no choice in what it has done. And what has happened, this increase in the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, may simply be one more dynamic in the evolutionary process. There appears to be one difference, and that difference is that the human species is now aware of what has happened, and it is aware of how it has happened. And how it has happened is basically that the human species, in order to ensure its own increase and its own multiplication and its own development, has liberated large amounts of carbon from the lithosphere, and liberated this carbon into the atmosphere in the form of carbon dioxide. Now, this was not done in vain. This process where carbon from the lithosphere was burned as fuel in order to generate energy has actually enabled the human species to evolve and to discover many new ways of being and to know much more about its environment, its origins, and its possible futures. So, it may be that this liberation of carbon from the lithosphere was actually necessary for the human species to get to its current level of awareness. It is possible that this may have been done in a more regulated, managed, and rational way. We could possibly have achieved the same results while liberating much less carbon into the atmosphere than we have done. However, what is of importance is that we now know what we have done and how we have liberated this carbon into the atmosphere. And we can now decide what we are going to do with the knowledge, the technology, and everything else that we have gained as a result of using this lithospheric carbon to generate energy and to build the currently global civilization that all of us find very supportive and useful. This video is an introduction to a series of videos in which we are going to look at what we have done and to look at potential futures and how we can respond to the issues that arise from our having liberated all this carbon into the atmosphere. And this series of videos will be brought to you by the Foundation for Civilizational Transformation and Conscious Evolution, where a small group of people are taking the data and the information that science has made available to us, putting it together to get a deeper and a wider understanding of what the human species has actually been doing over the last few hundred years, and looking at how we can respond to the context that the species has generated and what we can do in the future. So this series of videos is for people who can understand that we are capable of consciously determining what our future may be, and who understand that we can link up across the face of this planet and work together in ways that transform our current global civilization into something that is different and which actually helps us to realize the potential that we as living organisms on this planet have and can realize. Today, the global civilization of the human species appears to have no objective other than the rapid consumption of its environment. It is possible for us to generate a civilization which is quite different in its objectives, and at the moment we see that such a civilization may be able to take on the task of facilitating life's evolution through and beyond human being and its universal spread. So we will be looking at what we have done, how we have done it, the consequences of what we have done and how we have done it, what we can do to respond to these consequences in a way that leads to the transformation of our global civilization into one that has a very clear objective, an objective of facilitating life's further evolution and of facilitating its universal spread. We cordially invite all of you who are interested to join in our efforts. And as we go along, you will be able to see how you can become part of this initiative aimed at civilizational transformation and conscious evolution. Thank you.